Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I am Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick Guerra.
And Patrick, this week we are reviewing a film that, can I be totally honest with you, I was not all that enthusiastic about watching, much less reviewing before I saw it, because this little film is called Oddity by a director named Damian McCarthy.
Yes, Damon. Oddity released July of 2024, starring Gwillem Lee as Ted Timmis, Carolyn Bracken as Darcy/Danny, Tag Murphy as Olin Boole, Carolyn Menton as Yana, and Steve Wall as Ivan. And as you mentioned, Damon, written and directed by a man named Damian McCarthy, that you and I have a little history with, but most people probably have no idea. Even the hardcore fans are like, what's your history? We don't get it. We have a little coffer of what we call the dark episodes, the lost tapes, the vault, if you will. We recorded a shit ton of episodes during the pandemic that we actually never ended up getting to, and they just sit there. Caveat was written and directed by Damian McCarthy. We recorded an episode for Caveat, and it never aired. We ended up moving on to other stuff. We just had this little cachet of episodes, and maybe it never will release, Damon, because we weren't exactly in love with Caveat, were we?
No, we were not, and I feel like it's weird because we back then, as you said, we used to fill the coffers because we always prepared, because your schedule's hectic, my schedule's hectic, and so whenever we would have. During the pandemic, of course, everyone was weirdly having more free time than they should, but because our schedules were already kind of weird, we're like, well, if we have extra time, we should just record episodes. That way we have them ready. And it worked out a couple of times where we actually did get busy and we were able to use those episodes, but other times we were just doing what we do now, which is recording episodes week to week, and new movies would come out, we would watch them, review them, and put them out. So there's a couple in that coffer of things we recorded that have never seen the light of day, and Caveat is one of them. And the reason we recorded Caveat, much like Oddity, is because it started getting some buzz on the horror underground scene, however you want to say it. There were some horror creators, influencers, reviewers, whatever, talking about a film, and that one is on Shudder. Hey, Shudder.
Hi, Shudder.
And so we decided to review that one, and it went into the files, never to be seen again.
Yes, like a ghost deep in some Irish hill, living way off there somewhere, is Caveat. Maybe it'll get released one day. Maybe one day we'll finally start a Patreon, and all our patrons will get our dark episodes, and they'll get to talk with us about them and all that stuff. It'll be like their own special little secret. Maybe we'll do that. Do you know how many we have by chance? I know I'm springing this on you.
I want to say maybe 2 or 3 left, because we
really?
Did have New York Ripper, but we did release that one week a couple years ago. And I know we have, was that Bloodbeat? Bloodbeat is one that we reviewed.
We have Bloodbeat?
Yeah, we have
Bloodbeat. We have Hellbender?
Hellbender. Oh yeah, that's right. That's another
that's
one.
Right.
Hellbender. Yeah.
But did Vampires versus the Bronx end up coming out?
That did come out. That one did come
we did
out.
bring
I
that
think
out.
so.
Okay.
I think so. There's probably 3 or 4 left in there somewhere.
Okay, there's not many left these days.
Yeah, not that. But the Caveat is one of them, and it's kind of funny. We hadn't really thought about it until this movie came up, and when I saw Damian McCarthy, and I saw from the director of Caveat, I was like, oh Jesus, here we go. And listen, I've said this before, and I'll say it again now. There's a very limited amount of filmmakers who have been painfully consistent of always making good films. You know my opinion, my guy Quentin Tarantino, I think he can do no wrong, but I'll be honest, he's in a rarefied air, because even people I hold in the highest esteem, let's say Wes Craven, not all of Wes Craven's movies were amazing. A lot of them were, but even he's capable of a thing. I mean, we could talk about Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese's had a couple movies that weren't great.
Yeah. John Carpenter hasn't had a great, they haven't all been great.
Have you seen Escape from L.A.?
I saw it in the theater.
Let's go surfing. But Caveat, so I feel kind of bad prejudging, but when you talk about horror, I'm not going to say everybody, but you do get a general sense of style, in a film.
Mm-hmm.
And what Caveat, I don't want to turn this into a Caveat review. Caveat was just a very weird movie that didn't make a lot of sense. And you know my opinion on those movies. When they don't make a lot of sense and I have to go home and start reading articles to try to figure out what in the hell happened in what I just watched. And you and I both were like, at the end, we're like, what was this? Like, what, huh? And we didn't like it, and it just didn't work, and it was not a very favorable review. Let's just be honest what it was. So when this movie was coming out, I'll be the first to admit I prejudged. I was like, oh, Damian McCarthy, oh, Caveat. And I was like, oh, jeez. Here we go. And so went to, it's getting some buzz. People are talking about it. I did see a trailer the other day. I was like, okay, maybe, we'll see. Sat down in the theater, and I went in with the absolute lowest of possible expectations, thinking I'm going to walk out of this movie being like, wow, did I just waste 2 hours of my life? Not going to get too deep in the review here, Patrick, but I will say this right up the top, barely into the episode. I was stunned by this movie. Now, was I stunned good or stunned bad? We'll have to figure out throughout this review. But I left the theater stunned by what I witnessed on screen.
I remember with Caveat thinking to myself, like, there's a lot of missed potential here. Like, I think Damian McCarthy hasn't done a ton of work. A lot of it's been short films. It's been spread out over a long period of time. Listen, it's hard to make a movie. And Caveat, to me, I think at the time I said, this really feels almost like a student film. And in some ways good, in some ways bad. Like in some ways it was good because it's like you're watching a filmmaker take chances. In some ways it's bad because you're just like, well, I don't know if this is working. Like I don't know. This was an instance where I actually went in pretty much ice cold. All I knew is that a lot of TikTok creators that I now trust, that I have finally I've kind of curated a group of TikTokers that I think have great taste in movies, and they get a lot of advanced screenings. A lot of them do. And there were 3 or 4 that had seen it early, and they were like, Oddity's really good. And I was like, I don't want to say anymore. I just scroll right past it. I go, okay, I heard them. They said it. I didn't know who was in it. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't even know who directed it. I just knew that creators that I trusted were saying that this was good. And then all of a sudden it was coming out. And I was like, oh shit, well, it's coming out this week. And, why not do it? These people I trust are saying that it's coming to theaters. I haven't seen a trailer. I've barely seen a snippet of a poster that had Carolyn Bracken on the front of it. That was all I saw. And then I said to Damon, I go, hey, Damon, Oddity's coming out this week. We should probably check it out because these people keep pumping it up. And you said, oh, shit, it's the guy from Caveat. And then all of a sudden my expectations went from ice cold to, oh, no, we didn't like Caveat. And so the only thing I had coming in was a lower expectation, not because I thought Damian McCarthy sucks. I don't think that about him. I was just like, he makes a movie that's not my taste. It was still like, cool. Okay, that's interesting, but it's not interesting for me. And so then all of a sudden, I was like, oh no, I'm not looking forward to this movie now. Like now I have the opposite of because I loved that I was in completely cold. I'd never seen a trailer. I didn't even know the plot. I had no idea. And then the movie opens or starts, and I won't tell you what. I mean, other than what's basically in the trailer, which is, these people at a farmhouse and all this shit. And it's feeling very Caveat to the point where I was like, is this a Caveat remake with more money? It almost felt like it was kind of like a better budget version of Caveat. We had that with Last Shift and Malum. Last Shift was a micro budget version, and then Malum was it was basically a remake of its own movie. It was just made with more money. And I was like, I think that's what's happening here. Oh shit, Damon's gonna be pissed. And then as it starts to unfold in a very Damian McCarthy way, which if you've watched Caveat, it's a very, very, very measured movie. It takes a lot of time. This movie was doing that too. There was just a little bit more dread in this version of it, though. It was kind of slowly unfolding, but the way it was unfolding was pretty interesting. And I was like, this is different. This is not, this is still very much Damian McCarthy, which taught me a lesson. I was like, okay, I know that I didn't like his last movie, but his style is working with whatever this is. Whatever journey he's taking me on right now is very interesting. And we're gonna kind of have to dance around. Like, I don't, we can't. Most of the plot, I think, I'll let you, like, you're better at not spoiling the plot, so I'll have you say things that are not spoilery right now. But the journey Damian McCarthy took me on actually kind of made me appreciate Caveat a little bit. I was like, this is still very much the same director with the same stamp on his style, but he leveled up. And now is it like, is it good or bad or anything? We're saving that for spoilers, but I think you can kind of hear where I'm going with this. And what I liked about doing this was, this is a Shudder, oh hey Shudder, movie.
Hey, Shutter.
And a lot of our listeners probably don't have Shudder, but they love horror anyway. Well, we wanted to get this out right now because it's like, it's probably going to be in theaters for like 3-4 weeks. So go see it if you don't have Shudder, because Damon Martin and I, we trumpet the theater experience. I think Oddity is a good theater experience. That's about the most I'll spoil for how I feel about it. I think this is a good movie to go see in the theaters. Is it Maxine? No, it's not a big maximalist, colorful, crazy movie. It's not like that. But some movies are quiet and measured, and you need to be locked into them to appreciate them. We said this about In a Violent Nature. We both didn't have the same feeling about A Violent Nature. I loved it, and you were like, it's all right. But we both agreed it's a theater experience. If you watch it in the theater, you get the real experience. If you watch it at home, it's not going to be the same. And I think that about Oddity as well. I think it will play it at home well too. But when you can lock yourself into Damian McCarthy's world and be completely immersed by it the way you are in a movie theater setting, you will get every ounce of what he's trying to put out there much better.
So let me call out one name in particular. You mentioned the creators on TikTok. One guy who I've come to really trust and become a buddy of ours on TikTok is a guy named Slasher Talk, Justin, and he had reviewed Oddity and he put it out there and he said he liked Caveat, but he loved Oddity, is what he said. And
yeah,
his opinions are pretty damn trustworthy. He's not the kind of creator who just goes out there just trying to praise everything and just get likes and get.
I really like, sometimes he just goes, I think this movie fucking sucked. That's why I really like Justin for that.
Yeah, so he said it and he's like, this was actually scary and I liked it a lot better. Now, I'm not going to judge, because here's the thing about Caveat. One of the reasons we reviewed it back then, it never got released, but one of the reasons we reviewed it was because a lot of people liked it. It was getting a lot of buzz at that time. People were like, I really like this film, might be one of the best of the year. And we're like, well, shit, we better review this thing. And then we watched it and we're like, wow, we're not seeing what other people are seeing in this movie. But he had said, I liked Caveat was fine, but I really, really enjoyed this movie. And so I left a note. I was like, all right. I was like, I'm looking forward to it because I trust his opinion. And obviously he'll hear this episode, hopefully, and he'll know exactly how we responded. But I did. I'll be the first to admit, I did go in the theater with like incredibly low expectations. And there were a couple moments early on, as you said, where I was like, "Oh, this is feeling a little caveat-y." I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. Now, to be fair, as I mentioned in the intro, they filmed it in the same space. It looks different, but it's the same house. So when you said I feel like it's a similar setting, it was the same setting. It was literally the same setting. So right away, there's a couple weird things that happened early in the movie where I was like, oh, here we go. Like, this is going to be another one of those, art house, full on, as you said, student film. Like, we're just trying to put like weird shit on screen and make it look cool. And that's supposed to be a great movie. And while some people appreciate those movies, and I don't blame you for liking what you like, for me personally, I need a story. I need a coherent story. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Oddity started and it got a little weird. And I was like, oh, here we go. Then it got going. And the story made sense, made total sense. There was a mystery element to it. And as I said in the intro, this film ticks a lot of different boxes. It's a bit of a slasher, it's a bit of a psychological thriller, it's a bit of a haunted house, a bit of a witch story in a way. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
different genres packed into one film, but never in a way that you lose track of like what kind of movie am I watching? It all makes
Yeah.
sense. And when it was over, I think I texted you immediately after and I was just like, "What did you think of Oddity?" Cuz I wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy when I left and I was like, this was a really enjoyable experience. Like I got legitimately scared a couple of times, and we'll talk about
Mm-hmm.
best scares and a little deeper in spoilers. Like buzz going through my body, which rarely happens. Really rarely happens in theater. We've said this many times. We're messed up. Like we fully admit we're messed up. That's why we always grade scary movies on a scale. Like we have to grade it on like a curve because you and
You
I
have to
know.
contextualize it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't, and my girlfriend didn't go to this one. I usually judge by her reactions, and you judge by your wife when you watch movies with her. Like they're the normal people, not the ones who have been watching horror way too much. Um, but I got buzzed a couple of times where I was like, "Oh, jolted," which rarely happens. The story was really, really well done and well written. The characters were really well written, and there's a mystery element to this movie that we'll talk about in spoilers that I was like, this is really compelling. Like, this is super interesting. And I didn't see every direction it was going. I'm terrible at that where I figure things out. It's just the way my brain works. I figure things. You said this, you talked about this with other movies, like 5 minutes in, you knew exactly where they were going with a
Yeah.
movie. With Maxine in particular, you're like 5 minutes in, it's like, I already knew where they were going. I figured out a little later, but I still figured that out. But same thing, like I have that mind where I'm just like, I want to know. I figure things out. I didn't with this movie right away. And it's like this movie really is like a puzzle that
Yes.
they give you the borders right away. Like they give you the borders right away, and so you kind of know within the framework of what you're working with. As I said, a slasher, a bit of a witch story, a psychological thriller, and a haunted house. And then you get a little piece and a little piece and a little bit more piece, and you do not get to the center until really towards the end of the movie. And I kept guessing, and it was really well done. Where it wasn't like just like a straight up murder mystery where you're just like, okay, there's a killer out there, who's the killer? Like that's a Scream movie. And I love Scream, I love Scream. But like that's the premise of every Scream movie. Who's Ghostface? Who is the man behind the Ghostface mask? Now, I love those movies and I love trying to figure out who is the Ghostface killer, but it's pretty straightforward. This one wasn't really that. There was like an element of this and an element of that, and there's a puzzle piece here, a puzzle piece there, but you still didn't totally know where you were going until you reach basically the last 15 minutes of this movie. And it all makes sense. It all fits. And when it was done, I sat in my theater seat for a minute and I was just like, damn, did I just see one of the best horror films of the year so far? That was my reaction. Now, and again, I know I've talked about this before, Patrick. The danger of expectation, right? Maxine and Longlegs were both just
Mm-hmm.
so hyped. It was hard not to. This was the opposite. I went in with no expectations. If anything, I went in with negative expectations. Like, oh, here we go. This is an hour and a half of my life I'm never going to get back. And I left thinking, wow, like, I still don't like Caveat. I'm not going to lie about that. I'm not going to suddenly enjoy that movie. But this one you could see the growth in his filmmaking ability, not only visually. Visually, Caveat's not a bad movie. It's the story that just, oh, I'm not going to get
Yeah.
into it. This one, the story was just so much tighter, so much better told, dialogue, acting, the whole thing. And it just reminded me this is his sophomore movie. Now, to compare it to my guy Tarantino, I love Reservoir Dogs. It's an incredible movie. And I will always love it. It's one of my favorites. But you can see how much Tarantino learned from that going into Pulp Fiction, which everyone thinks Pulp Fiction is one of his best movies ever. That's just the growth of a first-time director becoming a second-time director. And Tarantino never went to film school. He never had any of that training. Reservoir Dogs, to me, is a great movie, but when you see what he did with Pulp Fiction, you can see the evolution in his filmmaking ability. That's what I saw in this. Caveat didn't do it for me, but Oddity did, and in a big, big way.
And I sort of like, I kind of want to apologize to Damian McCarthy because I'm sure he's a huge fan of the show and listens all the time. He's probably one of the guys that messages us on Instagram all the time, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, totally.
But basically, like when we reviewed Caveat, even though we never released it, we were still getting our bearings as podcasters. We were still learning how to like critically analyze movies as a team and as individuals, honestly, because I hadn't really done it in that way. I've always been a huge fan of movies, but I never had to talk about them at length before until we started this podcast. I think Damian McCarthy's style from Caveat is still very much in place. It's like, but it's just he got better at it. He just got better at all of it. Everything is there. It's still the man who made Caveat. It's still that's still his movie. It's still his style, his pacing, his atmosphere, his scares, his brand of visual style. It's all still there. It's just leveled up. And I like to believe we've leveled up. It almost made me go, I think I might need to rewatch Caveat and see if maybe I missed something. But again, hey, listen, that's also his first movie, his first feature-length movie. So you got to also give him a bit of a, a bumper to go, hey, okay, you're learning a little bit. He learned from Caveat, and he ended up making Oddity. And if you're still on the fence about seeing it, maybe it's time. We're probably gonna roll into spoilers here, so we can start talking about the engine of the movie. But like, go in cold. Don't go watching trailers. Don't go doing nothing. This was one of my opportunities. I love going in cold. I went in even colder than long legs, and it paid off big time.
So you actually sent me the trailer when you were saying, "Hey, maybe we should review this movie." And at that point,
Yeah, I didn't watch that trailer. I just sent it to you.
It just said, but I saw it said Oddity, and I saw the name Damian McCarthy. I was like, "Why does that name sound familiar?" And that's when I texted you back. I was like, "Oh my god, this is the guy who made Caveat." And I never. So I was like, all right, like let's go. And again, this is me almost apologizing for having those expectations, good or bad. I've said that many times. Like, you can go in with a movie thinking it's going to be bad, and it will color the way you see a movie. It's like if you don't like an actor, you can be like, I'm not a Ben Affleck fan. So you go in and see a Ben Affleck movie, and you may see Chasing Amy, which is probably one of his better performances, or what, you can watch him in what was the one that won all the Oscars?
Argo, yeah.
Argo. Like, Argo was an Oscar-winning movie, and it was a great movie. I loved Argo. But if you didn't like Ben Affleck, you go into that movie, sit down, and say, I'm just, all right, it's a Ben Affleck movie. And you color yourself with a certain kind of connotation going into the movie, and it's hard to break out of that. I'm more guilty with writers and directors than I am actors because, as you know, I'm a story guy. I like writing. So, if I see a script by a certain person, it says from the same guy who wrote this or girl who wrote this, I'm like, oh man, here we go. Or in a good way, I'm like, oh, here we go, this is great.
Yeah.
So it's hard when you're a bit of when you're a cinephile, when you're a film junkie like we are, it's hard to avoid those, right? Like, we rarely, I would say at least 50% of normal audiences, they may know the director, they may know they definitely know the actors, but they don't know, they may not know the entire filmography of the director like we would. But it does color the way, like I said, I had seen, like, going into Long Legs, I had seen a couple of Osgood Perkins' other movies. I liked them. They were pretty good. I wasn't, like, in love with them, but I liked them pretty good. Of course, my obsession, I love Micah Monroe. She's one of my favorite actors. And, of course, Nicolas Cage is incredible. So I was like, again, I had the good bones. With Maxine, it was worse because there were two films preceding it that were both really good. And, Mia Goth is much like Micah Monroe, one of my favorite actors. So I'm just, like, amped out of my freaking mind going into it. On the flip side with Damian McCarthy, I was like, I didn't like his first film. It didn't work for me. Nothing in that film really worked for me, and it left me with kind of a bad taste in my mouth. Now, I do, as a proud person who's from my family's from Ireland, I love to support Irish cinema as much as I can. We reviewed The Boys from County Hell, which was a great
movie.
Irish film, and Damian McCarthy, of course, is Irish. And so I went in, again, it's the other side of this, where it's like you can color yourself the other way. And I think in a way it worked out for me. Now, to be clear, people are like, well, are you saying you liked it more just because of how little expectation you had? Like, you went in at a 0 and it got to a 3, and that's like a big win for you? No. If you're gonna rate on a 10, we don't rate movies, but like on a 1 to 10 scale, like I went in at 0 and left much higher than that. I didn't leave it a 3 and be like, well, it was a D minus. That was better than the F of caveat. I want to be clear, but like I went in with no expectations, but it actually worked out in my favor because after the first like 5 or 6 minutes when it was a little weird and little caveat-y as I described it, then the story really got going, and when it started to make sense and the mystery started to unfold and I saw what he was doing and I saw the bigger world he was working with, which is not a bigger world, by the way. This movie is very self-contained in about 2 rooms, really. It's in a house and it's in a mental institution, which is where one of the characters works. That's really your only 2 settings this entire movie. It's a very small movie in that way. It doesn't feel that way necessarily. It all feels, it doesn't feel like, my love of claustrophobic movies. I love one-room movies. I do enjoy those movies, but it doesn't really feel like that. Even though it doesn't really feel like that in this movie. But once I saw what he was working with, I compared it to a puzzle earlier. Here's another weird analogy. It's like listening to an album and the first couple tracks are pretty good. And you're like, okay, I'm getting, and then it really gets in the meat of the album. And you're like, holy shit, I really see like this album is incredible. That's what this was for me. First couple minutes, I was like, all right, let's see what he's doing here. And then, boy, man, they got to Master of Puppets, and I was like, fuck yes, let's go.
Yeah. It's almost like sort of, I felt like you and I had an urgency after this to be like, we need to put this episode out. We need to get people in the theaters to check it out and see for themselves if they think this is good. Because I do think, like, you got to be in. Like, I almost wonder if Caveat might have felt different to me if I'd have sat in a theater and watched it. I don't know. It's hard to tell, and I'm far removed from it, so I kind of need to stop comparing Caveat to this. But truth be told, like, I just want to urge a lot of people, because sometimes I think we do Shudder reviews on here and people go, well, I don't have Shudder, so I guess I'll just turn this off. You have a chance to see this in the theater if you don't have Shudder, and it's worth it. Like this was a good theater experience from a small filmmaker, and that doesn't happen a lot. Like it certainly doesn't happen, every weekend. So you've got at least 2 or 3 weekends while this is in theaters to go check it out.
And I know we're going to get into spoilers in about 2 seconds. You mentioned earlier, like, let me describe the plot for you. I do want to do that for the non-spoiler audience. And the plot that I'm going to give you, by the way, is just in the trailer. I know you didn't see the trailer, and I'm being honest, most people probably would see the trailer. And what I'm giving you now is just the barest of bones that are in the trailer. So just again, this isn't a spoiler. This is, if you go watch the trailer anywhere right now, this is exactly what you will see in the trailer. So the story starts with a husband and wife have bought a house in a remote area in the Irish countryside, and they're renovating it together. The husband is a psychologist at a mental institution, and the wife is kind of working at the home, getting it ready as he's working late nights, and she's there kind of working on it, with him, of course, also, but obviously he's at work right now. And she calls him one night and she says, hey, I know you got to work late tonight. I'm just going to stay here by myself. She's literally staying in a tent because they haven't got anything set up in this house yet, and they're still working on it. And that's pretty much it. That's the setup. And then late that night, as she's in-house, late at night, getting ready to go to bed, there's like a weird noise outside her door, and she opens. They have like a sliding door that's like a peephole, but it's like a sliding door. And there's a weird guy outside with a glass eye, and he says, "You need to let me in the house." And she says, "What? Why?" And he says, "When you went out to your car earlier, I saw you go out to your car earlier, someone slipped in while you weren't watching. They're going to hurt you. You need to let me in the house." And she's like, "No. Like, I'm not letting you in the house. Like, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "I promise you, I saw someone get in your house." Of course, what would your natural instinct be? Get the hell out of here. And that's pretty much where we're at. And that's kind of where we cut away. Cut to 1 year later. The worst thing that could possibly happen happened. The woman in that house died or was murdered. And her husband still lives in the house because they spent so much money on it. He could not live in the house. He had to live there. and he goes to visit his wife's sister, who is a twin. And he goes to visit her on like the 1 year anniversary of his wife's death. And her sister is still tormented by her sister's death, and she is desperate to find out what happened. She just wants to know what exactly happened because they never truly solved it. They have an idea, but they never truly solved the crime, or not to her satisfaction. Let's leave it
Yeah,
that way.
they don't know why it happened. Yeah.
They know it happened. They don't know why it happened, and she just wants closure. She wants closure for why her sister had to die. And that's as much as I can tell you about this story. Now, her sister is a bit of an odd woman, and I don't think I'm really ruining this by saying she's a medium. I guess that's the best way to say it. Like she's special. She has like a senses
Yeah.
about her.
Yeah.
That's all I'll tell you. That's it. Not gonna tell you anything else. And that's where we're at. The woman dies a year later. Her sister and her husband are still like dealing with the aftermath of her death. Now, not gonna tell you how she died. Not gonna tell you who died, how she died, who killed her. None of that. But that's the setup. And that's as basic as I could give you so you have a better understanding. And also, by the way, be like, oh no, you told me she died. That doesn't, it matters, obviously, but like that's literally like 3 minutes into the movie, and then you move on to like the main plot of the movie. Like that's like the movie
Yeah.
gets moving at about the 10-minute mark, and that's after this has happened. And that's when it really picks up, and it's like a year later. So that's the basic bones of the plot and that's all in the trailer, by the way. Nothing I said is not in the trailer. So you're dealing with a bit of a murder mystery, a bit of an investigation of a sister desperately wanting to know what happened to her twin sister, and a husband still moving on from his dead wife, and that's kind of where we pick up in Oddity.
Damon, is it spoiler time?
I think it is spoiler time. As Patrick said so eloquently, and I'll say it again here, not nearly as eloquently. This is a theater experience. Go see it. Because not only did I like, and I mean this sincerely, like right now, I haven't ranked my movies for 2024 because we're only in July. We have a lot of time left to go. But if I was ranking my movies right now, I would say Oddity would probably be in my top five. I don't know where in the top five, but that's how much I liked it. I was blown away by how much I enjoyed this movie. But it is, as I said, it is a hybrid. It's a slasher. It's a haunted house movie. It's a witch story. It's a psychological thriller, all rolled into one. And as I said, that's not overwhelming. You and I know, Patrick. We've reviewed films in the past where we're like, what were they going for? Like they're mixing too much together. They're throwing too much at the wall, just trying to see what sticks, and nothing ends up sticking. That's not the case with Oddity. It is a little bit of a lot. It is a Bob Ross painting. He is pulling from all the different palettes, but it works. And by the end, you get this beautiful picture. That's what Oddity is to me. And I would say definitely go see it in the theater, especially if you like being scared in the theater, because there were a couple moments that legitimately made me jolt. And as I said earlier, that rarely happens. Go see it in the theater. I promise you it's worth your time.
Absolutely. Spoilers abound now, Damon. Now we can get into the thick of it all. And I love, by the way, that Bob Ross analogy is kind of perfect because Damian McCarthy, he's a very simple storyteller, actually. But he did manage to find the balance for all these different things. It doesn't feel like he's throwing a lot at us because he has a mind for being simple, right? Now, obviously, he's probably also on a serious budget too. He's like, we can't do much. There's got to be like 4 characters in this whole movie, okay? And we're shooting most of it on location at the one spot. What I loved and what you get more of once you're past the spoiler point, once you're past the trailer and all that good stuff, is that her husband is I guess you would call him like a mental health doctor.
He's a psychologist. Yeah, he's a
Psychologist. Yeah, he's a psychologist. So this is something that they don't really get into in the trailer. But he works night shifts at a mental health facility, and some of the people there are, they're very far gone, and she's back at this place living in a tent, while he goes overnight, and so she has to spend the night in this place that doesn't have electricity or anything. And that knock comes at the door. That knock is so great. and the little latch slides open, and the guy with the glass eye, who is Tag Murphy, by the way, who plays Olin. I'm saying it right, right? Is it Tag? I don't speak
Yeah.
Irish.
Yeah,
Yeah,
speak Irish. Yeah, you're getting it. Is it is Tag Murphy is Tad Murphy is
yeah,
how I would say it. Yeah, Tad
yeah.
Murphy.
Fantastic face on this guy, like great casting from Damian McCarthy, and that panic on his face. It's like somebody's in there, somebody's in there, and right away you're connecting him to the mental health facility, and you're like, oh no, like she can't trust what's going on. Obviously, the doctor has a lot of patients there, and what's going to happen? And a year on, we know what's happened. She didn't make it out of that night alive. They don't show you what happened, but she didn't make it out of that night alive. And we're back in that mental health facility, and the spookiness starts. And boy, Damon, like let me tell you, the sounds, the sound design of this movie, I almost gave MVP to the sound designer because I was like, this guy did a great job. But you hear something lurking, and it's Tag, and Tag is sitting in his room in the mental health facility, and you can hear something coming, and it doesn't sound small, it sounds huge, gigantic, and it's kind of rumbling towards him, and he's like, oh fuck. And again, you're dealing with someone who has mental health issues, so you're going, is he seeing this? Is what's actually happening? And poor Olin does not make it out of there well. In fact, he loses his head pretty brutally. And you're going, oh, okay, what's that all about? And then you kind of revisit the our husband, Dr. Timmis, as he goes, like you said, to pay visit to Darcy, who is Danny's sister. Who Danny died. Darcy's her twin sister. He goes into her little shop, and it's this little curio of haunted items, I would say. Something that like the Warrens would have, in the Conjuring universe. And she has a great little line. We learn really quickly that Darcy's blind. Darcy does not have sight. And so when he walks in, she just lets him know, like, all these items are cursed and the curses aren't lifted until you pay, which I liked. This movie is actually really funny. I don't know about you, but like,
It is.
I think there was maybe 25 people in my theater, and they all laughed at all the funny beats. Like Damien really nailed it with those. So there's a lot of funny moments in this movie that kind of lift the dread. And but anyway, Dr. Timmis is like, he pays her a visit, and she's still very much haunted by her sister's death. And she lets him know, like, hey, just so you know, like, I want to come out there at some point because I really want to like get my head around it, and I need an item from you, so if you can get it for me. And she explains that she believes, as you said, that she's a medium, that if she holds an object that touched somebody, that was somebody's possession, that touched their skin, that she can get a read on them. And Dr. Timmis, like, he's like, do you know where I work? Like, I work at a mental health facility, Darcy, and we've always known you to be a little kooky, but okay, fine, I'll get you what you need. And then, one day he's back at his farmhouse, and he's with his new girlfriend. He's moved on. That's all right. People do that. It's not a big deal. And he takes off for the night, and the girlfriend's kind of a little more agitated. She's not as nice as Danny was. She doesn't seem to be that way anyway.
Before he takes off is when she arrives. She gets
Yeah.
there as he before he takes off. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Before, and it's just like, and there's the funniness of like Darcy showing up unannounced, and then having like there's just all these great little interactions and stuff. And if it sounds like I'm slowly building, it's because this movie does slowly build. But what it leaves us with is Darcy and the girlfriend in this house. Dr. Tanis, I think it goes by Tim or Ted. Ted goes off. He's going to work for the day, or the evening, rather, the overnight. And she's stuck in this house with the girlfriend because the girlfriend can't find her keys. It's very familiar to what happened to Danny. So you're like, what's going on here?
And
And
Yana and the girlfriend Yana was already planning on leaving because she doesn't like the house. She's like, I'm gonna go stay in the city. This is before even Darcy arrived. She's just like, I
right,
don't want to be out here by myself. Screw this. I'm not staying in this creepy place in the middle of nowhere. I'm gonna go stay in the city, and then you can come there after you get off work. I'm not staying here. And then out of nowhere, they get a delivery of a box that's like from Darcy, and they're like, "What is this? Like, why are we getting a box from Darcy?" And then like she just shows up on their doorstep, like, "I told you I'd visit on Danny's anniversary. Here I am." And Ted's like, "Yeah, we talked about sometime. We didn't really set a date." And she just shows up, and she's blind, so you can't just be like, walk your ass on out of here. So they bring her in the house, and it's just really awkward, and it's so funny because Ted is moved on, and so this is a bit of his past connected to Danny, but Darcy's there, and Yana's like, "This is so weird, like why?" And he's like, "I gotta go to work. I gotta go. And Yana's like, "You're not leaving me here with her. Like this is bizarre." And he's like, "I gotta go," and she's like, "I'm not staying." He's like, "That's fine." He's like, "I'm gonna finish packing. I'm taking off." And Darcy's just going to be sitting here in our house by herself until you get home. And he's like, "All right, that's fine." And so they explained it to Darcy. "I'm sorry, I'll be back later after my shift's over." She's like, "That's fine." And Yana's frantically trying to get out of the house because A, she didn't want to be there to begin with, but B, she really doesn't want to be there with Darcy.
Yeah, she doesn't want to be here with Darcy. It's super awkward. And the one thing is that little delivery box. I love this. Inside it, I guess it's like a gift or something. I can't remember exactly how Darcy explains it, but it's like this is traditionally you're supposed to bring a gift of some sort made of wood. And she opens it up. Damon, how do you describe this? It's the most horrific looking corpse of a body, like made of wood. And it's like the size of a normal human being. And it's like stuck in like a death rattle. Like it's the weirdest, scariest, creepiest, oddest thing. And she's like, "Yeah, I brought this. It's a gift. Like I'm supposed to bring these. You're supposed to bring a big wooden thing." And you're like, "Okay, this is weird. It's quirky." Is what this movie is kind of unfolding in a very quirky way.
And they actually have a really funny interaction because she says, "Did you know that the tradition for a 5th-year anniversary is a wooden gift?" And Yana's like, "Yeah, we're not married." And she's like, "Well, you got something anyways." And so she gives him this giant wooden man who just sits in a chair, and it's creepy as hell because he's stuck like with his mouth wide open, his hands are on the table, but he's just a wooden man. Like it's just a wooden thing. It's the weirdest thing ever. And when she says that, she's like, "Yeah, you give wood on the 5th anniversary." She's like, "Yeah, we're not married and we haven't been together for 5 years, so I don't know why you're giving us wood, especially this thing." And that's just Darcy. Everything Darcy does is just like matter of fact. Like, "Oh, I'm just here. I said I'd come. Here I am. Here's my wooden man." Like you're like, what is going on here?
Like when your crazy aunt comes to visit and she's wearing like a wolf pelt, and you're like, "Why are you wearing that?" "Well, that's traditional. Where I spent some time in South Dakota this past year." And you're like, "Okay, gotcha, Aunt Darcy." Cuckoo. Like it just there's this whole cuckoo-ness to it all. And I don't want to narrate the whole movie, but I'll just say that like these two women now are stuck here because Yana can't find her keys. They are stuck here overnight, and I think it becomes very clear that Darcy's not just here for fun. Darcy is here to get down to brass tacks. She's brought the wooden man. She's brought a relic, which it turns out to be the glass eye of our man Olin, who had visited.
And that's what Ted gives her when he goes to her oddity shop. He's like, "You
Right.
wanted this," and she's like, I need closure, and this is the man." They all believe Olin Buell killed Danny. The patient. This was a patient that was Ted's patient in the mental institution. He got released a week earlier and goes to their house, and he's the one knocking on the door saying, "Someone slipped in while you weren't looking. You got to let me in because they're going to hurt you." Of course, and then we find out a year later she's dead, and Olin got blamed for the crime. So when you see him back in the institution again, it's because he got arrested and blamed for Danny's murder. And so he has that glass eye. After he dies, Darcy requests the glass eye because it's an object of his that touched him, and she knows if she touches it, she might finally get some sort of answer through her medium abilities of what happened to Danny. That's all she wants. And so Ted delivers it to her little oddity, little curiosity shop, or little shop there, and he says, "Well, I don't know why you want this, but here you go. And Ted, by the way, is very much a non-believer. He doesn't believe in any of this
Oh,
shit.
very
Like, he doesn't.
skeptical.
He's like, this is okay. Yeah, you're gonna touch an object and see where
Yeah,
it came
I
from.
work
All
at a
right,
mental health facility. Like,
yeah,
I think I know where this is going, but I'll play along for now.
yeah. So Darcy's in the house and she's had this eye on her and she's very at one point again, it's very funny. She turns to Yana and she's like, "Can you make me some food?" And Yana's like, "The fuck? Like, huh?" And she's just like, "All right." Like, it's just so awkward. It is such an awkward interaction. It is the definition of awkward. But then, at one point, Darcy just falls asleep, and Yana calls Ted, and she's like, "She's asleep, and she wanted food, and I can't leave because I can't find my keys, and this is just all getting really, really weird. I don't know what to do. I'm going to bed. Get here. Get out of work. I don't care if you got to leave early. I don't get back here as soon as you possibly can. Get out of work. Call in sick, whatever the fuck. Get out of there and come home." And he's like, "All right, calm down. I'll figure it out. I'll be there relatively soon." And before Ted can get there, some weird shit starts happening to Yana. She goes through a camera that belonged to Danny that she was like basically documenting the building of the house, and she was taking like random photos in the house. She even jokes with Ted about like she's ghost hunting in the house. Like she has a timer set.
She said that Darcy told her to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, Darcy told her to take so she's taking like these random photos in the house and she finds the camera and she's going through the camera roll and she watches a video of Danny in the tent that she's staying in and it's a earlier video of her and Ted interacting and she's like, "I love it here, it's great." And then she puts the camera over on Ted and he's freezing to death. He's like, "Yeah, this is awesome." And she watches it, and then she hears something outside. She turns the camera off, and then she goes back to it. She lays back down in bed, watches the same video again. This time, Danny's on camera. "Oh, we're in our new house, blah, blah, blah." She turns the camera around, and it's dead Danny in the video, like carved up, bloody, whatever. And she freaks out, throws the camera, and she's panicked. Like, holy shit, what just happened here? And then something's in the corner. What's in the corner? What's moving over there? And then you see it's dead Danny as a ghost, and she says, "Run." And Yana freaks the fuck out, and she panics and runs out of there, and she finally goes down. I'm skipping a little bit here because at one point she does interact with the wooden man. She's on the phone with Ted. She interacts with the wooden man, but I think that's not consequential to the overall story. She gets downstairs, she looks back in the box where the woodman was, and she finds her keys. She grabs her keys, she gets in the car, and she pieces the fuck out. She's like, "I'm out of here. Like, I'm done."
She pulls a Damon Martin and fucking peels.
Yana, you get my award. You get the I got the fuck out award because she did the smart thing. She found her keys. She didn't fuck around. She didn't say, "Oh, I'm leaving this blind woman in her house, just hanging out by herself with this weird wooden man. I'm getting out of here." And Yana gets out of there. And as it turns out, in the grand scheme of things, Yana wasn't responsible for anything. Yana was involved with Ted. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
She's, not everyone's cup of tea, but she's not guilty of anything. She's guilty of, we find out that she was having an affair with Ted during Danny's marriage with Ted, but she didn't do anything necessarily wrong.
She didn't do anything to Danny.
She certainly didn't do anything to Danny. So when she first leaves, I'm like, "Oh, what's going to happen to Yana?" Nothing happens to Yana. She's very much alive by the end of this movie. Just spoilers.
It's a great subversion of expectations because you're sure that she's ready to fucking go because she cheated
100%.
with her man. Nope, she doesn't.
100% when she got in that car, I was like, "Yep, she's dead." Nope, she's fine because she didn't have anything to do with Danny's death. She did a shitty thing. She banged Danny's husband, but she wasn't the one who did things to Danny.
And she listened to the ghost who told her to fucking run, and she ran.
Yeah, she ran. And so Ted eventually comes back, and again, he's very skeptical. Oh yeah, the one thing I forgot to mention, during the conversation that Yana has with Darcy in the house, she tells Ted, she's saying all this weird shit. And she said that some guy named Ivan killed Danny. what does that mean? And he go and Ted goes, I work with a guy named Ivan. She's like, well, she said he's the one who killed Danny. I'm getting out of here. I need to get the hell out of here. And she's just like, calm down, I'll be home. And then, the weird stuff with the ghost happens, and she actually does find her keys and be pieces the fuck out. So Ted eventually comes home, and he's, finding Darcy literally in the dark, just sitting there by herself. And she's upstairs in like a little corner, and she's like almost not in quite like a catatonic state, but she's almost like in the fetal position, but sitting, and she's like rocking, and she's like finally gotten her answer. She figured out who killed Danny. And Ted is just like, Darcy, you need help. Like, your sister mentioned that. At the beginning of the movie, Danny says, we should have Darcy over. She's not doing well. We need to invite her over. We need to make it look like we're not doing it because we're trying to look after her. We're just trying to, like, invite her to our home. And Ted's like, maybe I'll call her and invite her because, she's going to be suspicious if you call because she knows you're just checking up on her. And so he goes upstairs, and Danny is basically rocking back and forth. She's like, I figured out what happened. I know who killed my sister. It was awful. It was horrible. Blah, blah, blah. And Ted's like, Darcy, come on, calm down. Like, you're wigging out here. Like, this is not good. This is not good for your mental health. Maybe you need to come stay at my institution for a little while because you're really not doing well right now. Do you want to tell, like, because we're waiting to spoil like the big twist, like what we find out actually happens here.
Well, and I can't remember what item told her this. I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember, but again, she can read these items, and one of the items explains pretty clear to her, and she says flat out to Ted, "You had Ivan kill my sister." And this is why he's like, okay, you're off the reservation. You've gone too far. Now you're, and this guy, Ted, he's very calm. Like he knows how to actually deal with people because this is what he does for a living. He knows how to deal with people who maybe don't seem all there. And so he's talking with her very rationally. He's like, this is not good. Like, you can't accuse me of killing Danny. That's like completely wrong, but say what you're saying, that's okay, but we're going to get you some help. Finally, we're going to get you because you've gone a bridge too far. But these visions she's having are taking her to instances that we get to see. And this guy, Ivan, at the mental health facility, I love this little detail. This is a mark of what Damian McCarthy is doing so well in this movie. He's laying groundwork without having to hammer anything home, but he did it in this really, really subtle way. There's this moment that he can see, or that she can see, where Ted is talking with Ivan, this orderly, and the orderly's weird. The guy's off. But also, you have this suspicion, and they never really go into it, that the orderly's a little sweet on Ted. He's kind of interested in Ted. They never, even Ivan is very subtle about it. But that interaction, I love the play. It's a very nice. Damien did a great job setting that scene up without hammering anything home. But it was clear, like Ivan was like, "Hey, do you want to do something this weekend? Maybe we can go."
Go. You know what it reminded me of? This is such a weird correlation. I know you'll agree with me when I say this. It's like Happy Gilmore when Shooter McGavin hires the guy to like mess with Happy, and the guy's obsessed with Shooter, and he's like, I got money. Do you want to go to Sizzler, Shooter, on me? And he's like, maybe another time. And he's like, God bless you, Shooter. He's like, that's Ivan. Like, Ivan is kind of weirdly into Ted.
He's infatuated. Yeah.
And so when Ted's like, hey, like, do you want to help me out here? Because when we first meet Ivan, before we find out everything in the movie, they're just hanging out in Ted's office. And Ivan's like, hey, I was going to go do this weekend. You want to come make a day of it? And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna pass. I'm good. Like, let's not go to Sizzler. We're good. And you can tell Ivan's like a little bummed out. But Ivan is very much the guy with like Shooter McGavin. He's like, God bless you, Shooter. He's like, God bless you, Ted.
That's great. It's a very good analogy too. But I think what it shows is that if Ted wanted to manipulate somebody, he knew exactly who to mark. He was like, cool, Ivan's really kind of into me. He'd probably do this for me. And you know, you get these little subtle interactions that show maybe Ivan's actually a bit sociopathic and all that stuff. The way he talks about some of the people who live at this facility, so you get the sense that maybe he might have the stones in him to do something like that if asked by someone who he might really admire, he might really want to impress. Ted like kind of pushing this guy to do this for him? And Ted has access to all these different people who live here. Did he maybe send Olin out there too? And you go, wow, geez, that seems sinister, doesn't it? But indeed, that's how this eventually starts to unravel, is that indeed Ted was having a long-term affair with Yana, and he had sunk all his money into this house. He didn't want to go through a divorce with Danny. And he's like, he has his own sociopathic and narcissistic view of himself, where he was just like, well, Danny'd never be able to get over me. It'd be an absolute nightmare. So I'll just have her killed. It'll be easier to do this way, because it'll ruin me financially. And he's some sort of psychopathic narcissist anyway. So he's just like, well, I'm going to move on to this other woman. So I think the easiest thing to do is probably just kill my wife. Really? Okay, Ted, go on. Go off, King. Like, holy shit. But he does it with such, like nothing about Ted is intimidating. Nothing about Ted is sinister. Olin, Ivan, even Darcy seem more sketchy than Ted. Ted is just measured. Ted is like 2 steps ahead all the time. And circle back to her making that accusation of him. He goes, you know what? I hear what you're saying. I'm going to leave my phone right here. I'm going to go get some help. When I call,
he says, I'm going to go talk to Ivan. Yeah. We're going to get him on the phone, and you're going to talk to him and know that like what you're thinking is not true. I'm going to go back to the center. I'm going to call my phone. He puts it on a chair at the other end of the hallway. When it rings, come answer it. You're going to talk to Ivan. You're going to see nothing is wrong.
And this is a really great setup, because very early on, when Danny was still alive, she found signal in one place in the house. He puts the phone in that exact spot. He goes, I got signal right here. The phone will ring right here. So when it rings, please answer it. And he goes off. A little while later, she sits there in the dark, agonizing, because all this stuff has bubbled up, and she is very sure that this guy had her sister killed. And then that phone starts to ring, and she goes for it, and whoo, she falls through a piece of false floor that he knew was there and that he removed, and he put between her and the phone. Ted is a mastermind. Ted is a mastermind narcissist psychopath. And Darcy falls to her death. I mean, she will die from the injuries that she's received from the fall.
And remember, she's blind, so she can't see the whole.
She's blind. She didn't know. Blind people have to orient themselves to where they're at and all that stuff. So if you move something, if you move a chair just to the left or to the right in a place that they've oriented themselves to, they'll smack right in that chair, fall over. They could break their neck. It's like a really serious thing. So when he moves that piece of false floor, she had no idea. She walks straight through it. But she said something earlier. She goes, I killed Olin, and I'm going to have to pay for that. And you go, what? She killed Olin? Olin got his head stomped to fucking SpaghettiOs. Well, they cut back to that, and it's the fucking wooden man. She can possess the wooden man and use him as like almost like a golem, like if you know that that particular mythological creature. And that was the thing, that ominous, nasty thing that came for Olin was her. She used it to go after him, because she was like, well, that guy killed my sister, so I'm going to go after him. I'm going to take him out. So you learn that wooden thing can do that, but you also learn that the setup and the payoff is like, oh, I made a mistake. I, Darcy, knowing all these things, screwed up and killed the wrong man. I deserve this death for this transgression. I have to pay for that. Like, she's a very righteous person in that respect. She's like, I have to accept that I'm going to die right here. This is my punishment for doing the wrong thing. And then our mastermind Ted, he gets Ivan killed too. Well, I think when he brings her,
No,
he
so
brings Ivan.
Ivan, he goes back to the institution. He says she knows. I don't know how she knows, but she knows you need to go clean this up. And Ivan's like, okay, I'll go clean it up for you. And so he goes back to the house, which he's familiar with, which, by the way, not to get into like all the categories and everything, but like the scene where we see Ivan wearing like a creepy white mask. It looks very much like the mask from Hush, the Mike Flanagan
Yeah,
film Hush. And Danny is in the tent. She opens it. She sees him on the stairs. She thinks it's like a ghost or something. So she zips it back up, zips it back down. He's right in front of the tent. And then he kills her with a tack hammer. Pretty brutal, like brutal scene.
yeah,
So so Ted tells Olin, or Ted tells Ivan, you got to go clean this up. Like, she's believes she knows you killed Danny. And he's like, all right. So he goes back to the house. He's looking around. He finds Darcy on the ground. She's broken, blood pouring from her head. She's right next to death. Like, she is on death's doorstep. And he calls Ted and he's like, she's dying, man. Like, she's on her way out. Like, we should be good. But while he's there, we notice that the wooden man is no longer in the chair. And so he's looking around the house. He's trying to find like whatever evidence there is. And then we hear this thing just come stomping. And we see the wooden man is coming after. We see downstairs, we see Darcy like touching her chest. She's basically enchanting herself to go into the body of the wooden man before her death. And so the wooden man comes after Ivan in the house. He's running. This fucking giant creature is stomping around. And it grabs him in the air just like it did Olin. You're like, he's going to crush its head just like that. But then a weird thing happens. We wake up and Ivan's in the mental institution. He didn't die because Darcy died and the wooden man falls dead again. So it was basically holding, ready to crush Ivan's skull. It didn't get that far because Darcy died, the wooden man loses its power and Ivan makes it out alive. But now he's back in this mental institution, but this time he's a patient, not an orderly. And Ted tells him, there's something really wrong with you, Ivan, and you need to pay for your sins. You need to pay for your crimes. And yeah, you need help. And he's like, what are you talking about? And he's got him all, strapped down, everything, arms, bound, everything like that. And he says, yeah, man, you're in a bad shape. Like I had to commit you, man. I'm sorry. Like I had to do it for your own safety. I had to do it. And Ivan's like, what are you talking about? Blah, 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 blah. And then we kept seeing this vision of a guy with like a Hannibal Lecter mask on the entire movie. You just see the back of him. You hear him like chewing or just making weird sounds. And you can tell he's like he's the Steve Buscemi in Con Air. He's the one inmate
yeah.
no one wants to mess with. And suddenly he's like, Ivan, you're going to get the help you need. And Ted leaves. And a minute later, the guy with the Hannibal Lecter mask no longer has the Hannibal Lecter mask on. He comes in, literally chomps down on Ivan's foot because you can tell this guy's a cannibal. And that's going to be the end of Ivan, is this other patient. So all this was orchestrated by Ted. Ted didn't want to get a divorce because he knew that Danny would take him to the cleaners. And as you said, he's a narcissistic psychopath. He's like, she could never live without me anyway, so I'm putting her out of her misery. He hires or basically tells Ivan to go kill his wife because Ivan's infatuated with him. So he ordered Ivan to kill his wife. They covered it up because Olin was there. Olin was also a patient of Ted's, and they just thought he got released from the mental institution. What you come to find out is that Ivan and Ted were in his office talking about this, and and Ivan literally says, why don't you just divorce her? And he's like, she'll take me to the cleaners, man. Like, I put everything I have into this house, and I can't afford to start over again. It's easier if she dies, and I think it'd be great if you do it for me. And in the next room is Olin listening through a vent, and he's like, holy shit, he's plotting to kill his wife. So when Olin showed up at the house, he was actually trying to save Danny. He was legitimately there to save her, and he legitimately saw Ivan slip into the house when she wasn't looking. He was really trying to save her. So this whole time, Olin was the good guy. Yeah. And we find out that Ivan kind of messed with him when he was still a patient there, and Ivan was a really, really bad dude. He's the guy in Terminator 2 who licks Sarah Connor. He's just a weird, creepy dude. So that's how Ivan. That's how Olin knew, and that's how Olin got out to the house and tried to warn Danny, and she died before he could do anything about it. So he overhears this. So now Ivan is dead. He feeds him to the cannibal, but Ted got away with everything. Darcy's dead. The wooden man. He actually taunts Ivan. He said there was no wooden man. The wooden man was right there. I burned it out in the front yard. Didn't come to life and kill me. You're just out of your mind.
Yeah. Any
So
little evidence that maybe Ivan's blood was on that wooden man? Well, that's been burned
yeah,
up. Ted's
it's
always
gone.
2 steps ahead.
And Darcy's dead. So end the story.
Yeah.
Now there is a downside for poor Teddy because he calls Yana and Yana's like, I want nothing to do with you anymore. Stop calling me. Like, leave me the hell alone. I'm done with you. So that was his punishment with that was Yana's like, I'm out. Like, I'm done with you. This is too bizarre. I'm out. So Ted's like, all right, well, I guess start over again. So he goes home, and while he's home, he gets a little package in the mail. He opens it up, and it's a doorbell, like a little ringer bell that you would see like a
Yeah.
hotel. And early in the movie, when he goes to see Darcy at her place, and he hands her the glass eye that belonged to Olin so she can touch it and try to see what happened to her sister, she's got her hand over this doorbell thing. I don't know better.
It's like a desk bell.
Desk bell. Yeah, you ring it. You ring for service. Ding.
Yep.
She's
Service bell.
hovering her hand over it, and he's like, "What are you doing?" She's just like, "I'm feeling the energy." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "This is an old, ancient bell that was for a doorman or a bellman, and apparently, like, it's haunted because the spirit of this bellman was inhabited into this bell, and after he died in real life, when you ring the bell, the doorman, the bellman comes back for you, and that's the story." And he's like, even then, Ted's like, "This is bullshit." Like,
Yeah,
come
like,
on,
okay,
really?
great.
Yeah, but she's like, she won't touch it. She's like hovering over the little bell, but she's like, "I'm not touching it." So Ted goes back to his house. Now again, that's very early on. That's right when you meet Darcy. She tells him the story about
Yeah,
the
that was
bell.
basically how we introduce her.
She's
That
got it
story.
in her hand and she's like hovering over it. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "This is a haunted bell." And he's like, "Okay, of course it's haunted." And she's like, "If you ring the bell, so apparently the bellman comes for you." And, that's what happens. And he's like, "Okay, sure, whatever." So at the end of the movie, he goes home and he has a little package waiting there for him. He opens up the package, it's a little box from Darcy's shop. He opens it up and it's the bell. And he sets it on the table and he's just like, this hokey, stupid bullshit. Like, come on now. So he doesn't do anything at first. Finally, he's like, sure. Ding. Sits there, looks around, very mockingly, by the way, looks around like, oh, there's nothing there. And then the very final frame of the shot is Ted sitting there with just the ugliest little, happiest appeased smirk on his face. And there's the dead bellman standing right next to him. And that's how it ends. Is Darcy got her revenge, we have to imagine.
She knew. Well, she had to have known before she ever came to the house because she'd already killed Olin. She had to have known, like, I have to set up my final play here. My final play will be I'll send the bell because if I know what I know about Ted, that he's this ultra narcissist, he won't believe the story I tell him. In fact, he'll fly in the face of it because he's that kind of arrogant. I'll tell him the story, and then if all goes to shit, as it will, because she has this mind that can see all the steps herself. She makes the steps differently. She knows that if that bell ends up in his possession, he's done for. So he might get away with everything, but he won't be able to resist ringing that bell because he's an absolute narcissist who's so sure of himself that he could ring that bell and nothing will happen because he believes he's untouchable. He really does.
He
And
also
so
doesn't believe he also doesn't believe in ghosts or mediums.
oh
or
yeah,
this
no,
other
no,
stuff.
none of these things. None of these things.
He's very
But
much you and I, because you and I we'd be like, ring the bell, because like, come on, this is bullshit. Like,
Yeah,
come
I'm
on.
ringing the bell. It's not a big deal. But also, I think too, it's just is that he has wiped every bit of evidence clear, like he's covered his tracks perfectly. And so she was just like, the only way to get him is with his own arrogance. So give him the bell. And you said earlier the puzzle pieces. It's like watching a puzzle come together. It's very much like that. This movie, every little detail of it fits so well together. If they show it to you, they use it, right? Chekhov's gun. That's a classic rule that I've learned, and it's super important to screenwriting. This movie's full of it. Everything they show you, every setup they walk you to, eventually pays off. Every little piece, every little thing matters, and it all clicks together so perfectly in the end. And it wraps itself up. This movie's funny. This movie's scary. This movie's thrilling, intriguing, mysterious. It leads you down corridors you don't understand how you're going to get out of, which we talked about with Long Legs, which was just like, as the movie progresses, you go, how are we getting out of this? How is this going to wrap itself up? And it wraps itself up so perfectly that you get a complete experience. And what I think we haven't really emphasized while we've been kind of retelling the story is just how simply the movie unfolds. Like as you watch it, it's so plainly, beautifully done, beautifully shot, beautifully lensed and well acted and great lighting and great atmosphere, great sound. It takes its time letting all these things unfold in front of you. But I think this time around, like, as opposed to Caveat, like Damian McCarthy knew when he needed to make you laugh. He's like, this moment, I should make you laugh. This moment, I should make you ask why. And these 3 moments down the line, I should give you the answer why. And it felt very lyrical, very rhythmic. I think, guys like Martin Scorsese talk about like movies is a rhythm. Movies are a music, like a musical piece. If you really think about it, they kind of move and move and move and move, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then a low part, and then a high part, and then this, and then that, and then it all comes together to create a singular experience. And that's what you get with Oddity. You get this singular experience that feels very satisfying when it all finally ends. When it, even though most people want to see Darcy make it out of this, they want justice for her and her sister, but she's not going to get it because she killed the wrong person earlier on. They make it all fit. They make it all make sense. She has to pay for that sin. They don't just let her go by. We've had movies like that where it's like, I think that person is wanted now for murder. I understand that, yes, they were supposed to kill that person because that person was bad, but she can't just go on living her life. She fucking brutally murdered somebody. Darcy brutally murders somebody, she pays for that. So like everything all works out, and I really like it. It leaves you with a really satisfied feeling.
And what I also loved about this movie, because I didn't really see it coming, because when you see the movie at the beginning, you come to understand that Danny died and she was murdered, but they're never, they think it's Olin Buell, and again, Ted's wrapped up because he actually knows what happens, but he's just like, yeah, it was my former patient, and he went out there and did it as like a revenge to me because I was his doctor, and he killed Danny because I wasn't there. And he's satisfied. Again, this is before we know the real story about Ted. Darcy's the one who can't let it go. Darcy's the one who's like, I need to know. And that's why she had the wooden man kill Olin Buell, because she thinks that's who killed her sister. She wants that closure. She needs revenge for her sister. But then after touching his eye, she realizes Olin didn't do it. She doesn't know who did at that point, but she knows Olin did. And that's what she says, like, I'm going to have to pay for this. Like, I did a horrible thing. When she finally confesses to it, to Ted, she's like, I killed Olin. Like, I brutally murdered him, and I'm going to have to pay for that because he was innocent. He did nothing wrong. He was being genuine and sincere. He was trying to save Danny, and I brutally murdered him. I'm going to have to pay for that. But what is so interesting about this movie, and why I said it's like 4 different movies wrapped up into one in terms of like being a slasher, being a psychological thriller, being a haunted house movie, is that it's a really compelling mystery. Because while Ted is very much like a Patrick Bateman character, totally sociopathic, but weirdly kind of charming and unassuming is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Unassuming. You would not look at Ted and be like, oh yeah, here's a mastermind killer. He's a skinny little dude. Like, you're like, this guy couldn't kill my little brother. Like, he's nothing. He's kind of a wimp.
Yeah.
But he's smart. He's very smart, very, very calculating. And so as this mystery starts to come together, In the beginning, my thought was, who was it that killed Danny? Not why did they kill Danny? Because it
Right.
just seemed like a random act of violence, and because they interlaced the ghost parts of the movie, and because Darcy is a medium and she has this weird connection to the Wooden Man. Obviously, we do see the ghost of Danny in the house. She actually says that to Ted at one point. She's like, "Oh, Danny scared her off," and she's like, "Oh, the ghost of Danny scared her off." Oh, Darcy, you
Gotcha.
really need help
Right.
here. But like, because there's this ghost element, and because we just get bits and pieces of what happened, and we do see when we see Danny die, we see this weird white masked killer with a tack hammer. We're still not sure, is it corporal or is it ethereal? We're not really sure which it is. So they interlace so many different genres in here that you're not. Was it a ghost that killed her? Was it a person that killed her?
Yeah.
Was it Olin Buell who killed her? Was it a patient? They do such a good job of layering the mystery that by the time you get to Ivan killed her, you're still kind of like, well, Ivan works with Ted. And then you see Ivan's weird quirkiness, God bless you, shooter, like that little weird relationship. You're almost thinking, did Ivan do this to, so he could have Ted to himself? Was that what happened? I had that thought in my head at first. I was like, is this creepy bastard, like, did he kill the wife to hopefully get the husband? Is that what he wanted? They do such a good job of layering the mystery between ghost elements and the what do you call it, the red herring of it all, where you're like, this guy did it, but it's not him. By the time you get to Ted, orchestrated all of this. He basically told Ivan to go kill his wife. I would say hired him. I don't think he paid him, but he hired this man to kill his wife. I'll be honest. I knew Ted was a shit. You knew right away he cheated on his wife. And it's like he moved on rather quickly. And he said, "Oh, she helped me through my tough time, and we've been together." You can tell that Ted's a shit, but he's not. You don't really necessarily think he's a killer at that moment. Like, you don't necessarily think he's the one. So they layer it so well. The mystery is so well that by the time you get to Ted orchestrate all of this, even I was like, "Oh shit." Because they do it in such a good way of all the different layers coming together. That is it a ghost? Is it this? Is it just this guy's unhinged and he did it, but he blamed Olin? All these different things come together. And so by the time Ted is found out to be the guy who orchestrated and masterminded all of this, I was like, damn. Like, even I didn't totally, even though I knew Ted was a shit and I knew Ted cheated on his wife, I could tell Ted was something was going on there. I still didn't necessarily think he killed his wife. Because all these other factors, and it was just so well orchestrated that I didn't necessarily see it coming.
It's a really good murder mystery, is what it is. It's a supernatural murder mystery. So you're really just trying to understand all the mechanics of Danny's murder. You're like, how does all this tie together? Very much like Knives Out or Clue or anything like that. You're just like, how does this all fit? And adding in the metaphysical aspect and Darcy's like second sight and all that good stuff. It's this great little extra layer. We talked about it with Longlegs the week before. It's like, if you're going to go for it, go for it. Make the rules of that world however you want to make them. And making Darcy someone who does not have sight, but has sight beyond sight, that can help her see things that happened in some other ways, but she also makes mistakes along the way. So she's not this like unstoppable psychic machine. It's like she's also trying to piece it together, and along the way she's going to make mistakes, which she did with Olin. She made a mistake with him, so she has to rectify all of that, and it didn't actually help her answer things. She needs more answers. And so it's just this great murder mystery, which is always fun and engaging if done well. And I think this one's done well because it doesn't require a lot of people. Damian McCarthy kept this whole thing very tight, very efficient, just a few people to make all the gears turn. You get a really satisfying, well-paced, but yet takes its time. Like, I would call this a slow burn, but like when it needs to ramp up, it ramps up. It's like, okay, this is a slow burn that's getting to lean in, and then we're going to grab you, and then we're going to toss you across the room, and then we're going to try it again. And it's it's just pretty interesting how it all laid out. And again, I'll say it, very satisfying ending. because it all made sense by the end. But if you had questions here and you had questions there and it didn't make sense here, or why did this person do that there, there's something in the movie. Like it's going to be a good rewatch because you'll go, oh, that fits there. Oh, that fits there. Oh, that fits there. Oh, I didn't see that time. I didn't see how they did this. Very intricately laid out movie. Very intentional filmmaking. I'm a sucker for that stuff.
While a totally different movie, one of the movies that we ranked amongst, I think it was number 2 or 3 for me, and it may have been number 1 for you that year. I can't remember. Was Speak No Evil, but we didn't
Yeah.
review that on the show. And the reason we didn't review it on the show is because the payoff of that movie is the ending. Now, there's some unsettling parts, there's some kind of weird, creepy parts, but mostly it's the payoff, man. And even though we do a spoiler section, it almost felt wrong for us to like spoil that because it's so unbelievable, and it is like the biggest gut punch ever in that movie. And so we decided not to review it. Now I kind of regret it because it was such a good movie, and we're gonna review the remake. The remake's coming out in September. I've seen the trailer like 9 million times now.
Yeah.
And I feel like we have to review it, A, because we just, we raved over the original, and B, I want to compare it. Like, you're remaking it literally like a year and a half or 2 years after the other one came out, so I want to know what you did. But we didn't because it's just, the payoff is so grand at the end, it almost felt wrong to ruin it because also up to that point, while it's kind of creepy and unsettling, it's not really horrific. The ending is what fucking literally beat you over the head with a baseball bat, where you're just like you leave the theater, you leave the experience sick to your stomach, in a good way, by the way, like in a oh my god, I can't
in a good bad way.
Like in a way where I'm just like I got done watching, my eyes were just open, my mouth was gaped, and I was just like, what in the world just happened? This was unbelievable. I think Oddity could have had that same kind of thing because we had all these different bits and pieces and steps to get to where we finally find out that Ted is the mastermind killer. What they injected, why it was different, and why this film works so well, and while I agree it is a slow burn, but what they inject in the center of it is the Yana character. Yana being at the house, having this like creepy interaction with Darcy, having the creepy interaction with the wooden man. That's the part of the story I didn't tell earlier, where she sees the wooden man and it's got these holes in the back, and she sees there's something inside, so she gets these like medical like thongs and like pulls out these pieces. She sees photos of Darcy and Danny. She sees a clip of hair. She finds a vial of blood, like really creepy shit. And then at one point, Darcy, who is asleep, wakes up. She's like, put it all back. And she's like, oh, Jesus. So like there's this interaction between, and then obviously the Danny ghost thing where she says run, and then, Yana actually leaves the house and gets the fuck out. That whole setup, that whole Yana and Darcy interaction really saves the middle of the movie because you're still not sure what happened. And yes, you do have suspicion that maybe Yana had something to do with it. I don't know. But that whole interaction of Yana being in the house with Darcy, being scared, the wooden man, and then she sees the ghost, that all makes it move along like a horror engine. You know what I mean? And so when you get to the big payoff at the end with the wooden man and then eventually with Ted, that middle section still moves. While it is a slow burn, I agree, there's still enough scares and creepy moments with Darcy and Yana, which, again, in the end of the story, Yana didn't really matter. Yana was, she cheated on, she was Ted's mistress for a while before he ended up murdering Danny, but she didn't have anything to do with it. She didn't know he ordered it. She certainly didn't, she wasn't okay with it. She had no idea, like, her, it was, of course, she took advantage of it by being with Ted afterwards, but she didn't do anything. She wasn't the one who orchestrated this. Ted was the one who did it. So in the end, Yana, that's why she gets to go free. Like that was Darcy's way of, like, when the keys are there, I think that was Darcy's way of saying, I know you had nothing to do with my sister's death. Here's your keys. Get out. And sure enough, she does. So it was a great, like, it was a great juxtaposition of character because you're suspicious of everybody. You're suspicious of what's going on here. You're not sure. Was it a ghost? Was it this mental patient? What was it? And that whole center section of the movie where it's just Darcy and Yana in the house together is super creepy, really scary, and great and compelling. But ultimately, Yana's character didn't matter because she didn't have anything to do with this. That's why she gets to go free. She wasn't guilty. And so, yes, it's a slow burn, but the slow burn payoff, like in Speak No Evil, was almost like you had to go through all these like kind of bits and pieces to get there. The payoff is the ending. The payoff is, in this movie is like multiple times. You get the payoff with Yana with the ghost. You get the payoff with the wooden man and Ivan. You get the payoff in the mental institution. Then you get the payoff at the end with the bellman. So it's a really, really well like plotted movie.
I'm even realizing right now what the whole key thing was about. And this might have been what you were saying basically, but like that whole middle interaction with Yana and Darcy is Darcy, interrogating her and basically, she's like, Inspector Clouseau or whatever. She's there like trying to investigate. And she had those keys. Why would she have those keys, Damon? Because they touch Yana's skin all the time. So she could hold them. She could figure things out. And this is, by the way, Yana's up in the bedroom and downstairs is Darcy holding these keys and having a second sight. And she's looking around in Yana's brain. You're looking around in Yana's memories and she doesn't see anything. And then so when Yana comes back out, there's your keys. You're good. Like and they didn't need to explain that, but you realize that, and this is why I'm really championing this movie. Nothing is wasted. It all means something. It all mattered. And it makes me want to like go back to certain movies that I was like, oh, this is really well made, but I didn't like it. It didn't resonate with me. And see if they were doing things like that. And see if I wasn't picking up on that with other movies. Again, I said it earlier, it makes me kind of want to look back at Caveat and go, what was I not experiencing in Caveat that I'm experiencing in this movie? Because it all mattered. And I love that. I was just like, there's not a piece of this movie that is wasted.
Yeah, and Danny telling her to run was literally Darcy being like, okay, you're good. You didn't do anything to my sister, so scare the piss out of you so you'll actually run out of this house. And she gives her back her keys. They're in the box. And it's perfect.
And who is Yana running from? She's really telling her to run from Ted.
Yeah.
Ted's a fucking psychopath. Yes, I have this wooden killer machine, and yeah, Ivan's a fucking creepy murderer himself. You need to run from Ted. So let me scare the shit out of you so you will never come anywhere near her again.
And she doesn't. By the end of the movie, she doesn't. So, yep. Let's get into categories. We do have a lot to get into with categories because, like I said, as you can clearly tell, we both really enjoyed this movie. So let's kick things off as we do each and every week with best performance. So, Patrick, when it comes to Oddity, who did you give best performance?
It was hard not to give best performance to Carolyn Bracken, who plays Danny/Darcy. And really, even in as the movie was playing out in the beginning, because again, I did no read up. I was completely cold when I came in. And I actually didn't realize that it was the same woman playing twin sisters, because Darcy has short blonde hair and Danny's got sort of like longer brunette hair. So they kind of looked different. And I was like, oh shit, it is the same woman. And she inhabits these two characters very well. Now, obviously, you don't get as much of Danny because she's really only in the opening scene and in a couple of little ancillary scenes. But you get a lot of Darcy. Darcy's funny. Darcy's quirky. Darcy's odd. Darcy's got great clapbacks. She's quick. She's funny. It was a really enjoyable experience watching Carolyn Bracken do her work.
Yeah, she was really, really good, and I really enjoyed her performance. And if I'm being honest, like, she probably was the strongest performance in this movie, but doing the dual role was interesting because even I was like you. I was like, I didn't quite realize right away that they were twins because they do make them look different enough to where, because you see Danny very briefly in the opening of the movie, first like 5 minutes, and then she's gone. And then you see Darcy, and I was like, is that the same actress? And then, it kind of, clicked in my head it was. But yeah, she does it really, really well. And again, playing a blind woman, playing a medium, she's playing a lot of different roles in one character, and she does it really, really well.
She really does. Yeah. I mean, now I'm like, well, now I got to see what else Carolyn does.
Yeah. So now, I'll be honest, I think Carolyn Bracken was probably my favorite performance as well, but I do want to give a shout out for my best performance to Gwillem Lee, who played Ted. The husband, because Gwillem Lee, as I mentioned a minute ago, is a little bit of Patrick Bateman. He's kind of unassuming, good looking enough. He's
Yeah.
successful doctor.
Clean
Those kind of
cut.
things. Yeah, he's unassuming. And I think that's very much what Patrick Bateman tries to be in American Psycho, where he's a good looking guy, but you don't really think of him as like, it's very much like all his friends at the firm. They're all kind of like Bateman's like kind of a dork. Like,
Yeah.
they secretly are kind of like he's kind of a dork. Um, and that's how he gets away with what he gets away with because he's very unassuming. And that's Ted. As I said, even when they finally revealed it, even then I was like, damn, really? That's what happened? Like he orchestrated this whole murder? Jeez, because he's so unassuming and he's so analytical and he's so calculating that you just and he's such a skeptic that you're just like, yeah, I mean he's kind of a weird, he's kind of a unlikable guy, but not a murderer, like, and again, because they layer in so many other things like the ghosts and the wooden man and the medium and the mental patients and all these different things, you don't necessarily suspect him. They do a really good job of making him unassuming enough to where you don't necessarily think he's a killer. And he does a really, really good job of that. By the end, but also, by the way, the performance is steady throughout. Like, he doesn't get found out and then suddenly become manic. He's
Right.
still like him going back to the house and telling Darcy, like, you're having a problem. I'm gonna go back to my hospital and I'm gonna call you with Ivan so you can see he didn't do this. Like, you're not okay, Darcy, but I'm gonna placate you here. But what he was secretly doing was putting his phone over on the chair and then removing the false bottom of the floor so she would fall to her death. But the entire time, it's like his pulse never broke 70. He's just
Yeah.
like, it's all good. I'll take care of you, Darcy. I know you're not well. I'll call you. Answer the phone. He never gets, and you know how that goes in movies, and I get it. Like, you get found out, you panic, you become a bit of a maniac where you were very subdued before. Not Ted.
No.
Ted knows he's in charge. Ted knows he's got it figured out. Ted knows he can get this taken care of. And it's a really interesting performance.
And that rolls right into my MVP, our most valuable players in these movies. I did give it to Gwillem Lee for his role as Dr. Timmis because of all the things you just said, the guy is even keel. He's got good bedside manner. That means he's a good doctor. He just knows how to talk to people, and and I love that you brought up that he doesn't turn into a psycho because that's rote. We've done that a million times where it's like, now I'm Mr. Hyde, like, now I'm a psychopath. It's like, that never happens. That's not how he operates. He operates by letting others do the work for him. He can mentally manipulate you really well. It's like his superpower. He's like, I can definitely tell you what to do, and you will do it, and you will fall right into my plan. He was always two steps ahead of us the entire time, and I dug what Gwillem did with that. Like he just knew to play it very evenly, and he never broke. He never broke from that. Not even in the end. Even in the end, when he was defiant and he was going to ring that little bell, he didn't do it like in some maniacal way. He did it in his way, where he was like, "See, I'm going to do this. Nothing's going to happen." And he just sat there with his smug satisfaction that he was the same old Ted. Nothing was going to change, and I like that. I mean, it takes a good actor to measure themselves and not try to go to the director and go, let me go crazy, let me go over the top, and maybe he did, and Damian reeled him back in, but for him to play that the whole way through consistently, the consistency is what really got me, and that's why he got my MVP.
Yeah, he was great. So my MVP, I bet you I can guess that you're going to say that my MVP is going to be Damian McCarthy. I bet that's what you're thinking, right? You're going to think Damian
That
McCarthy?
was a guess, sure.
Yes, I tend to go writer director. Writer is kind of my rule. I'm the writing guy, so I tend to lean that way. But I'm actually going in a different direction. And my MVP I was going to say caveat for Oddity goes to a guy by the name of Paul McDonnell. Now, who is Paul McDonnell, mind you? He is an effects creator. He is the mastermind who made The Wooden Man. And I read an interview with Damian McCarthy talking about this. So he was working with his guy. So he has a guy who does all the sets. It's his friend who's a carpenter. He's the one who built the caveat set, and when he tore it down, that's when he looked at the house and said, you know what? There's an opportunity here for another movie. Let's do another one here. And so his friend helped him build the sets for Oddity. And they were trying to come up with this creature, this thing that would be in the house with Darcy when she shows up to visit Ted and Yana at the house. And they were coming down to the wire, and they're like, I don't know what's going to be. And he's like, well, you know what? I know this guy, Paul McDonald. He's a sculptor. He's a creator. Let's call him. Maybe he can help us out. So they get on a Zoom call, and he's like, here's the idea. Here's what I want. And he's like, all right, hold on. And so he gets out his clays, he gets out his stuff, and he starts sculpting something real quick. While they're on the Zoom call, he kind of describes what he wants. He does it, and it looks perfect. And Ted's like, Damian McCarthy's like, oh, this is perfect. How long will it take you to build a full model? And he's like, probably 3 or 4 months to build a full wooden man. And he's like, how about 3 or 4 weeks? And he's like, all right, let's see what I can do. And in 3 or 4 weeks, Paul McDonald built the wooden man from scratch. And that's what we get in this movie. And it is one of the creepiest looking figures. I don't really know a better way to say it. Like, you know, it does move in the movie, obviously, but it's just like a statue for the most part in the biggest part of this movie. But he did it in 3 or 4 weeks. He's like 3 to 4 months. He's like, how about 3 to 4 weeks? And he did it. And that's what we got, was because of Paul McDonald.
Well, thank you, Paul McDonald, for your absolutely horrific mind and creating what is just one of the most disturbing dolls, or sculptures or whatever it is. It's so jarring in the movie. It's almost comedic, because you're like, why on earth would anyone carry this thing around? But it's there, and it's iconic. And I've seen since a lot of that doll. Like it's people are into it, like the Annabelle doll and all that stuff. I think the Oddity doll is going to be making its rounds at the horror conventions this coming fall.
Very creepy, very creepy. All right, let's move on to best scare. As I said earlier, there are some legitimately good scary moments in this movie. I went in with low expectations, and I wasn't sure what to expect, because even movies that I don't love, I can still find scary moments in. Like Men is a movie I didn't like, but there were still some legitimately disturbing moments in that movie. I wasn't sure what to expect, but this one surprised me with how many times I jumped and jolted and was creeped out. So, Patrick, what was your best scare in Oddity?
You talked about it a little bit earlier, which is when Yana is in her bed, and she's actually, the one thing I will give Yana, and I think it was really important that Damian put this in the movie, is she's not abrasive about his past with Danny at all. And when she finds this camera, it's got photos of them together, and she doesn't throw it to the side in disgust or anything. She really just doesn't like the house. She's really very turned off by the house, probably because of what happened to Danny in that house.
Yeah.
And women tend to be attuned to stuff like that, and she was just like, it's creepy here. That's all I'm saying. But when she finds the camera with pictures of Danny and Ted, she could, and you could easily paint her in a way where she's just like, fuck, I don't want to look at this stuff. I don't want to look at him with his former wife and all that stuff. She's actually looking at these pictures and photos wistfully, like in kind of a nice way. She's just like, oh, this is nice. And she's looking at that video that you talked about rather lovingly. And then she gets distracted, and she comes back, and she revisits the video. And that turn, when it's supposed to be Ted and instead it's dead Danny, it was up there with scares. It reminded me a lot of the scare in Hell House LLC, where he's in his bedroom, and then you can see that there's a girl sitting behind him, like against the wall, like that kind of like, very unsettling. So that was a great jolt part of it, but that wasn't the part that got me. It was a great jolt, but what got me is when the camera falls, because she rightfully freaks out, and she gets out of the bed, the camera starts to flash. And it's, I mean, just ever since Texas Chainsaw Massacre and that sound of the flash going off. And this flash wasn't overly dramatic, but it would go off and it would kind of light up the room just a little bit, and just a little bit again. And you're like, it's fucking coming. And Damian is timing out this scare, and you're like, what's it going to be? What's it going to be? And then when it flashes and you see Danny's dead, whatever ghoul in the corner, and she screams, "Run!" And you're like, "Whoa, that's fucking freaky, dude. Why is this ghoul telling me to run?" And just the timing and the atmosphere of it all, the time it sent a chill right up my spine. I was like, "That's fucking freaky, dude." Like, did it make me jump in my seat? No, but I felt the energy in the room, and then the smattering of people that were in this room were just like, "Oh fuck." Like, that's a legit scare.
That's one of the ones that got me was the run part. The part with the camera, I think, actually got me more because we'd already watched the video. And so when
Yeah.
she watched it again and it turned into dead Danny, I was like, oh shit. Also, we probably should have started suspecting Ted a little earlier because when she finds the camera, she tells Ted, she's like, I found this camera. It's got pictures of you and Dan. And he's like, yeah, throw it away. And she's like, don't you want to keep some of the photos? Like, this is your wife. And he's like, yeah, I guess so. Like, he's very mad. Like, he's moved on. He's clearly moved on. And so she was the one, Yana's the one who's like, don't you
Yeah.
want to save, like, some of these photos? So, yeah, that was the scene with the camera combined with the run was definitely one of the ones that got me. Like, that was one of two in particular that made me just, my skin crawl. And I literally was like, oh, shit. The one that got me most, though, is my best scare. And that is when Yana's up on the second floor, which overlooks the lower floor, and she's up on the balcony talking to Ted on the phone. And she's like, yeah, she's here, and this creepy ass wooden man's here, and she's fucking weird, and she's sleeping, and she made me get her food, and like, this is just, I need to get the hell out of here. You need to get out of work and get home. And she looks down over the banister, and the wooden man is leaned up looking at her with that screaming face. It was leaned forward the entire time.
Yeah.
It's now leaned up looking at her right in the eye, and she drops her phone. That scared the piss out of me in the moment because the wooden man was just leaned forward. Very creepy look on his face the entire time, but it was just stoically sitting there. And then when she looks down, it's looking up at her. And I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah. No, some really good, really well crafted scares in this movie. And it's not like laced with them. It's not the whole thing is like overflowing with scares. It's just the ones that are done are very effective.
Yeah. Let's talk about best gore because this isn't the goriest movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it is there are a couple moments and one in particular which I know you're going to highlight, which I think is probably the real highlight. But what was your best gore in Oddity?
I think, again, this is a testament to Damian going, I know I'm building this slowly. I know you're trying to figure out what's going on, but every now and then I'm going to give you something to keep you on the hook. Very smart. Which maybe might have been my bigger complaint about Caveat is that probably didn't have as many of those moments as this one did. But this is when poor Olam is back in that mental health facility and he hears something very ominous and very large coming his way, and you're just like, well, what's happening? It's freaky enough that the sound and the anticipation, and then when he is finally face to face with whatever it is, we still can't see it, and his head gets absolutely fucking smashed, like in a very gory, very, very, very violent way. You're just like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. This movie was kind of just an even keel, creepy movie, and then it just gave me this. I mean, literally, it just looks like someone dropped a 600-pound lead weight on this guy's head. I mean, it just smashed into nothing but bits.
And that really is the best gore. I was going to mention, when when Darcy falls to the floor and you see her kind of bloody on the floor. That's really the only other gore, but this is the one. And again, we're dealing with a very small budget. I know Damian McCarthy has said like we didn't have a lot of money, so it was perfect to be able to shoot in the same location where we shot Caveat because we already had access to the house. So it was, why not do another one here? That they put all their effects budget into the wooden man and into that scene with Olin getting his head crushed. And it is incredibly brutal, especially the aftermath when you see him laying there, just his headless corpse and just muck, blood, and bone out in the middle of the floor. It's pretty disgusting. And that is, like I said, they didn't have a lot of budget. Whatever they had for the effects, that's the one they dumped it on.
Yeah, there was also one that I really liked, which was probably the only other like bloody one of the other bloody moments was they showed the aftermath of Ivan attacking Danny, which they did. It was just it was a really clever setup, which is her basically. There's an anticipation, and you're seeing her, and like you said earlier, you get the reveal of the masked killer. Is it a killer or is it a spirit? We don't know. We couldn't really tell. but you see him come at her with a hammer, and they cut to a wide shot, a good profile shot of the tent and the empty space where he just was, but now he's in the tent. And then I think they cut to the like later on, or either that next morning or whatever, and the tent is just sprayed with blood. It was this yellow tent that is just doused with tons and tons of what is Danny's blood. It was just a great, very disturbing but very clever reveal of what happened without having to show the terrible aftermath of what had went on.
Yeah, that was a great one too because they had this tent was lit up. She had a lantern in the tent, so when you see the aftermath, the tent is still lit up. It's dark around the tent, and you just see the bloody tent afterwards. It's a really really good effect. That was also good in terms of the effects of this movie. And again, taking advantage of your space and taking advantage of your shot there because again, they probably didn't have a huge budget to actually show Danny's bludgeoned corpse, which again, maybe in another version of this movie you do see because it is horrific, but they probably didn't have the budget for that. So how else can we express and show the aftermath of Danny's death? Well, we can show that this yellow tent is now just absolutely covered in blood, but you see it from the inside out, so you don't actually see the inside, you just see the blood splatters everywhere all over the outside. It's a really cool effect. I agree. That was great.
And that's a smart way to show people, like, okay, when you don't have the budget, think creatively to express what happened in this moment, and it was very effective.
Absolutely. Let's move on to our next category, which is remake, sequel, or leave it alone. It's pretty self-explanatory, but this is the category where we take whatever movie we're reviewing and we say, should they remake it, should they sequelize it, or should they just leave it alone? So when it comes to Oddity, Patrick, remake, sequel, or leave it alone?
Well, Damon, there was one little element that I think we forgot to mention, which is very early on in the movie, and I know this happened to you too. You're sitting in that theater, and she's talking about these objects that have a lot of like history in them. Up in the corner, and I know you saw it because I saw it too, was this bunny rabbit. This bunny rabbit with little symbols, and you go, what the fuck is that? Is that what I think that is? It was the bunny from Caveat. And then when she does something, it clicks, it clangs its little symbols, and I went, oh no, it's a fucking Caveat sequel. I go, ah, shit. I got roped into a Caveat sequel. Like, and I was like a little bit pissed. I was like it almost like dropped me down, but then I got really engaged in the story, and my attitude quickly wiped that away. So, but I thought to myself, technically, this is in the Caveat universe. Damian McCarthy snuck that in, just like you'd see an Annabelle doll in a James Wan movie or something like that. They've snuck it in, and is very much, we are living in the Caveat universe, whether we like it or not. This is basically another offshoot of the Caveat universe. So technically, I would normally say leave it alone, but the way Damian McCarthy operates, we could probably get a sequel, technically, that probably only needs the wooden man in it. Or maybe the glass eye, Olin's glass eye.
The wooden man got burned, so
he got burned. But what if he comes back? I mean, he is a piece of magic after all. But I guess my point.
No, I get what you're saying though. Absolutely.
Or the bell. You know what I mean? The bell that came for Ted. Like there's a trinket and an object that can jump from movie to movie without it ever having to be a sequel, because this is definitely not a sequel to Caveat. So my thought is, yeah, leave this alone. We're not going to revisit the Oddity, but we are probably going to revisit this universe yet again. Why wouldn't Damian McCarthy do that a third time?
So interesting, because this is all part of a much larger universe crafted by Damian McCarthy, because before he did Caveat, in 2013, Damian McCarthy made a little short film called How Olin Lost His Eye. And it's about the character Olin Buell, and it shows how he lost his eye and he had to get the glass eye. It's a short film from 2013. Damian McCarthy clearly likes kind of creating this like universe where they're kind of attached but not really. Like you saw the bunny from Caveat, which again, I had the same thought. I was like, oh, Jesus, not this. And then, it really had nothing to do with it. But I agree. And my thought was, and you took it from me, so good job. My thought was the bell. The bell at the end with Ted. We know Ted died. We know Ted's getting killed by the bellman.
Yeah.
That bell was a great little hidden piece at the end, and you see at the beginning of the movie, as you said, Chekhov's gun. You got to show it to us. You got to use it, and they use it again at the end of the movie. I think it'd be great if that's the piece. And because what Darcy said at the beginning was all the objects in here are haunted. They don't stop being haunted until you pay for it and take it out of here. Which maybe that's true, maybe it's not. She's a very weird person, so you never know. You could literally just have that oddity shop of like objects from there, and that could be different movies or different vignettes or whatever. You could do an anthology where they're all just different, different. You could even have her come back to, do like a prequel in a way where she's talking about the objects, and that's where they, she's like the storyteller of the objects, and then we see where they go and what happens to them, and somebody steals an object and what happens to that person, because obviously it's happened where somebody stole something. So yeah, I agree. I think there's a world, and clearly Damian McCarthy likes to connect the dots, even in the smallest little ways. Like again, I had never seen his short film from 2013. I had no idea until after I started doing research for this movie that How Olin Lost His Eye was actually a short film that Damian McCarthy made a decade ago, and then Olin Buell shows up in this movie with his glass eye. What a great little tease. Doesn't matter. Doesn't hurt. And again, if you've never seen Caveat, would that little bunny moment matter? Not really. Like, it's just another object in this oddity shop. But for you and me, in maybe the worst way possible, we're like, oh, no. But it was from his other movie. So maybe that's just how he's going to do things.
Yeah, maybe so. And guess what? Because of Oddity, I'm here for whatever's next for him. Whether it's a sequel or a shared universe thing, Damian McCarthy's got my money. Let's see what's next.
Yeah. Now, our next category is kind of interesting with this movie, which is, can we survive this horror film? Because I don't cheat on my girlfriend. I hope you don't cheat on your wife. And so I can't really imagine we're going to be Ted. And I'm not Ivan, so it's kind of hard to put myself in this movie. But if we somehow find a place in this movie, are we going to make it out alive?
It's a good question, because you and I are very skeptical, and we would poke the bear. You already know that, like, if you and I go into a curio shock, of course we're going to be respectful. We're not going to go in there and fuck around and break stuff or play with stuff disrespectfully. But if someone's like, oh, yeah, that's a cursed bell, so if you want to buy it, go ahead, but don't ring it. I'll be like, I'm buying it, and I'm totally ringing it. Like, because we're skeptics. We just are. And we would fuck around with something, and then I'd end up being, crushed by a fucking bellboy.
Yeah, I'm of the same mindset. I see these videos. When I first watched The Conjuring, because I was not like a Conjuring fan. When we reviewed it on the show, I think I mentioned that was like the first time I had seen it. And so I kind of went I did a deep dive on The Conjuring and the Warren. I was familiar. I'd heard the Warrens. I'd heard who they were, but I wasn't like super. I knew them from the Amityville Horror thing. I didn't know them from everything else. And so I started digging into them. I started watching YouTube videos of people going into their lair of haunted objects, and they had that giant case with the real Annabelle, which is a Raggedy Ann doll, and a just giant sign like "Do not come close, don't touch the case, don't come near the case." And like it's very and people that people I've seen on online through TikTok and Twitter and Instagram, whatever, they're like, you can feel the energy in there. There's something off about it. Me personally, I'd be like yanking that door open, grabbing the Raggedy Ann doll, chucking it like, oh, it's scary, oh, and then throwing it across the room like, boy, it's haunted. And in my real world mind, I know it's not really haunted. I don't believe in that. I know it's just a fucking Raggedy Ann doll. But in this movie, for the purpose of this movie, there is hauntings. There are possessed items. There are cursed items. So yes, I would be the jackass that should be like, don't ring the bell. Ding! Because I'm just like, nothing's going to happen. And then, I'm dead. So in movie land, Annabelle gets me. In the real world, I'll take that Raggedy Ann doll and punt it across the room and not give a shit.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, we're not making it out of the Damian McCarthy universe with the way we are.
Not at all. Not at all. Patrick, our last category as always, and I think we've already kind of hinted at this a lot, but we might as well just answer the question. When it comes down to Oddity, is it scary?
It's definitely scary. And it's scary in a way that doesn't come around a lot. I think I just praised Up and Down Longlegs, and I really enjoyed it, and I told you it was full of dread. But it didn't really scare me. Like, it didn't really get me. After watching Oddity, I was like, am I going to be worried about going home and being in the dark later? I sort of like there was this sort of like buzzing in the back of my head, like, is this going to scare me later too? Like it had a lot of moments. It knows when to play with the shadows, when to play with sound, when to make you sit in the nasty dread, in that really, really uncomfortable dread that you just want to shake and it won't shake. This movie so far this year, I have no idea where it's going to fall in my rankings. I really don't. I don't want to assume too soon. But as of right now, it's going down as I think the scariest movie that I've watched this year. And that's saying something.
100% agree with you. I was going to say the exact same thing. This is so far the film that has scared me the most. Um, and as I said, not to go back to our Long Legs review, like I liked Long Legs. I thought Long Legs was super creepy, super disturbing, but it didn't really scare me. And I've said that about other movies this year, like creepy, disturbing, and even when I've used words like scared, this was a movie that scared me multiple times on multiple different levels. And when you add in the mystery element of it, the murder mystery element, it really was intriguing too. So it was definitely scary. And yeah, I would say again, I don't know what the final rankings are going to be at the end of the year. I can't say because we're only in July. But I would say, this is the scariest film I've seen thus far in 2024, alongside, Late Night with the Devil, which I love. And that's my favorite film so far this year. But also in terms of scary, it is very scary. It's very unsettling. And and as I said, it is that perfect Bob Ross painting where it really does mix a lot of different things together. It's the round brush, it's the knife, it's all the different tools that Bob Ross gives, but at the end you get this perfect little painting and the perfect little tree and everything. Somehow Damian McCarthy pulls it off, where he combines a slasher with a psychological thriller, with a mystery, with the haunted house story, a witch. All of it kind of comes together, and it doesn't feel like a mix that should work because so many people get it wrong. It works so perfectly, and it really is scary, it really is unsettling, it really is disturbing. And it's a great mystery. And as you said, it's also funny in moments. Great story, great dialogue, great performances. So far, I don't know the number, but to me, this is the top 5 film of the year so far. One of the top 5 films of the year so far.
On craft alone, just how well crafted Damian McCarthy made this movie, how the character work is so intricate and every little thing they say and do matters, all that shit. It's like there's only 2 movies that are like that intricate to me this year. It's Oddity and Long Legs. And Long Legs isn't that scary. It's dreadful, highly dreadful. But this is scary.
For me, it's Oddity and Late Night with the Devil. Like, I think Late Night with the Devil was just a super creative, inventive, unique movie. And I've seen movies like Oddity in bits and pieces. I've seen haunted house stories. I've seen plenty of slashers. I've seen plenty of psychological thrillers, but I've rarely seen them combined into one film and it actually work. Mm-hmm. And Damian McCarthy did it, man. Great job. Talk about a 180 from what I felt about his first film. This is a total opposite.
I think we owe him a couple of pints.
Yeah, we do. We owe him a couple of drinks. So well done. Caveat. I keep going about the caveat. Oddity. That movie haunts me, apparently. That's like my wooden man. Oddity is in theaters right now. I would, as Patrick said earlier, not to keep repeating ourselves, I would highly recommend checking it out in theaters if you can. It's a limited release movie, but it was showing in most of my major theaters around here where I live, so I'd imagine it's somewhere near you if you got a movie theater near you. Go check it out. It is going to end up on Shudder sometime later this year. I don't know the timeline of it, but it is going to end up on Shudder, so you will be able to see it there eventually, but I would highly recommend if you can, go see it in the theater. It's available right now. As always, we want to say a big thank you to everyone tuning into the show. If you got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, we always love hearing from you guys. Make sure you hit us up on social media. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead on X/Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can also send us emails at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. You can also find us on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and, of course, over on our YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube, please do. Even if you don't watch all the episodes over there, just check out. It really does mean a lot for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So again, just search Rewind of the Living Dead and you'll find us over there, as well as all your favorite podcast platforms. And as I mentioned earlier, you can hit us up on our social media channels, but you can also hit us up on our personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes into the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you then.
Peace.